Hansen was traveling down a stream. As he walked along on the bank he saw something red in the water. They were red plums. He wanted them badly. Taking off his clothes, he dived in and felt over the bottom with his hands, but he could find nothing, and the current carried him downstream and to the surface again. He thought. He took stones and tied them to his wrists and ankles so that they should weigh him down in the water. Then he dived again, he felt over the bottom, but could find nothing. When his breath gave out he tried to come up, but could not. He was nearly dead when at last the stones on one side fell off, and he barely rose to the surface sideways and got a little air. As he revived, floating on his back, he saw the plums hanging on the tree above him. He said to himself. You fool. He scolded himself a long time. Then he got up, took off the stones, threw them away, and went and ate the plums. He also filled his robe with them. Then he went on down the river. He came to a tent. He saw a bear woman come out and go in again. Going close to the tent, he threw a plum so that it dropped in through the top of the tent. When it fell inside, the bear women and children all scrambled for it. Then he threw another and another. At last one of the women said to her child. Go out and see if that is not your Uncle Hansen. The child went out, came back, and said. Yes, it is my Uncle Hansen. Then Hansen came in. He gave them the plums and said. I wonder that you never get plums, they grow so near you. The bear women wanted to get some at once. He said. Go up the river a little way, it is not far. Take all your children with you that are old enough to pick. Leave the babies here and I will watch them. They all went. Then he cut all the babies' heads off. He put the heads back into the cradles, the bodies he put into a large kettle and cooked. When the bear women came back, he said to them. Have you never been to that hill here? There were many young wolves there. And that little hill here? They asked. Yes. While you were gone I dug the young wolves out and cooked them. Then they were all pleased. They sat down and began to eat. One of the children said. This tastes like my little sister. Hush. Said her mother, don't say that. Hansen became uneasy. It is too hot here, he said, and took some plums and went off a little distance. There he sat down and ate. When he had finished, he shouted. Ho. Ho. Bear women, you have eaten your own children. All the bears ran to their cradles and found only the heads of the children. At once they pursued him. They began to come near him. Hansen said. I wish there were a hole that I could hide in. When they had nearly caught him he came to a hole and threw himself into it. The hole extended through the hill, and he came out on the other side while the bear women were still standing before the entrance. He painted himself with white paint to look like a different person, took a willow stick, put feathers on it, and laid it across his arm. Then he went to the women. What are you crying about? He asked them. They told him. He said. I will go into the hole for you, and crawled in. Soon he cried as if hurt and scratched his shoulders. Then he came out, saying. Hansen is too strong for me. Go into the hole yourselves, he is not very far in. They all went in, but soon came out again and said. We cannot find him. Hansen entered once more, scratched himself bloody, bit himself, and cried out. He said. He has long fingernails with which he scratches me. I cannot drag him out. But he is at the end of the hole. He cannot go back farther. If you go in, you can drag him out. He is only a little farther than you went last time. They all went into the hole. Hansen got brush and grass and made a fire at the entrance. That sounds like flint striking, said one of the women. The flint birds are flying, Hansen said. That sounds like fire, said another woman. The fire birds are flying about, they will soon be gone by. That is just like smoke, called a woman. The smoke birds are passing. Go on, he is only a little farther, you will catch him soon, said Hansen. Then the heat followed the smoke into the hole. The bear women began to shout. Now the heat birds are flying, said Hansen. Then the bears were all killed. Hansen put out the fire and dragged them out. Thus one obtains food when he is hungry, he said. He cut up the meat, ate some of it, and hung the rest on branches to dry. Then he went to sleep. Of the old time. Far up the Saguenay River a branch turns off to the north, running back into the land of ice and snow. 10 families went up the stream one autumn in their canoes, to be gone all winter on a hunt. Among them was a beautiful girl, 20 years of age. A young man in the band wished her to become his wife, but she flatly refused him. Perhaps she did it in such a way as to wound his pride, certainly she aroused all that was savage in him, and he gave up all his mind to revenge. He was skilled in medicine, or in magic, so he went into the woods and gathered an herb which makes people insensible. Then stealing into the lodge when all were asleep, he held it to the girl's face until she had inhaled the odor and could not be easily awakened. Going out he made a ball of snow and returning placed it in the hollow of her neck, in front, just below the throat. Then he retired without being discovered. So she could not awake, well the chill went to her heart. When she awoke she was chilly, shivering, and sick. She refused to eat. This lasted long, and her parents became alarmed. They inquired what ailed her. She was ill-tempered, she said that nothing was the matter. One day, having been sent to the spring for water, she remained absent so long that her mother went to seek her. Approaching unseen, she observed her greedily eating snow. And asking her what it meant, the daughter explained that she felt within a burning sensation, which the snow relieved. More than that, she craved the snow, the taste of it was pleasant to her. After a few days she began to grow fierce, as though she wished to kill someone. At last she begged her parents to kill her. Hitherto she had loved them very much. Now she told them that unless they killed her she would certainly be their death. Her whole nature was being changed. "How can we kill you?" her mother asked. "You must shoot at me," she replied, "with 7 arrows. And if you can kill me with 7 shots all will be well. But if you cannot, I shall kill you." 7 men shot at her as she sat in the wigwam. She was not bound. Every arrow struck her in the breast, but she sat firm and unmoved. 14 times they pierced her, from time to time she looked up with an encouraging smile. When the last arrow struck she fell dead. Then they burned the body, as she had directed. It was soon reduced to ashes, with the exception of the heart, which was of the hardest ice. This required much time to melt and break. At last all was over. She had been brought under the power of an evil spirit, she was rapidly being changed into Achenu, a wild, fierce, unconquerable being. But she knew it all the while, and it was against her will. So she begged that she might be killed. The Indians left the place, since that day none have ever returned to it. They feared lest some small part of the body might have remained unconsumed, and that from it another Chenu would rise, capable of killing all whom she met. One night on Cape Cod at Gay Head, a Mashpee woman and her children were alone in their wigwam. The children were sound asleep in their blankets, and their mother sat knitting beside her central fire pit. As customary, her door flap was wide open. Suddenly she became aware of someone approaching her doorway, and went to see who it might be. A sailor stood outside. She asked him, "What do you want?" He replied, "I'd like to come inside and warm myself by your fire, because my clothes are wet and I feel chilled to the bone." She invited him inside and offered a place for him to sit beside the fire to dry out and warm himself. She placed another log on her fire, then resumed her knitting. As she watched the fire, she noticed that she could see the fire right through the sailor's legs, which were stretched out between her and the fury as if he were a ghost. Her fear of him increased, but since she was a brave woman, she kept on with her knitting, while keeping a suspicious eye toward the visitor. Finally the sailor turned to the Indian woman and said, "Do you want any money?" Her first thought was not to answer his question. Then he repeated, "Do you want any money?" She replied, "Yes." The sailor explained, "If you really want a large amount of money, all you have to do is go outdoors behind your wigwam. Beside a rock there you will find buried a kettle full of money. I thank you for your hospitality. Good night." He went away. The Mashpee woman did not go outdoors immediately, as she wanted to think about the sailor's proposal. She sat and knitted and thought for a while longer. Still, she felt frightened from the evening's experience and was reluctant to leave her wigwam. More knitting time elapsed. Then she thought, "I might as well go out and see if the sailor spoke the truth, to see if there really is a kettle of money out there." She took her hoe and went outside to the back of her wigwam and easily saw the place described by the sailor. She began to dig with her hoe. She realized that every time she struck her hoe into the ground, she heard her children cry out loudly, as if in great pain. She rushed indoors to see what was their trouble. They were soundly sleeping in their blankets. Again and again she dug with her hoe, each time her children cried out loudly to her, each time she rushed in to comfort them, only to find them soundly asleep as she had left them. After these episodes had occurred several times, the mother decided to give up digging for the night. She thought she would try again early next morning after bright daylight and her children were awake. Morning came, but she wondered if she had only dreamed last night's happenings. Her children were eating their breakfast when she went out to the digging place. There was her hoe, standing where she had left it. But she could see that someone else had been there in the meantime and had finished digging while she slept. Before her, she saw a big round hole. She knew someone had dug up the hidden treasure. She was too late for the pot of gold promised by the ghostly sailor. But again she thought and wondered, but was I really too late? Again she thought, that sailor may have been the evil spirit in disguise or even a real ghost. Perhaps he was tempting me to see whether I cared more for my children or more for the gold. Nevertheless, the Mashpee woman and her children continued to live in their village for a long, long time, even without the benefit of the ghost's kettle of gold.